Welcome back to Mastering 3D in Photoshop. My name is Kirk Nelson. We are now on lesson 13, and this is using constraints. Constraints in the 3D aspects of Photoshop is one of those features that's not very well documented, and it's even less understood and less utilized too. Well, I shouldn't really say less utilized because you use it almost every single time you extrude text. Any 3D text that has a central area that's cut out uses constraints. Because if you look now at this number 8, as you can see, it's extruded. We get the inflations in the materials here, and we have this boundary constraint items down here. And what these are the path outlines of those areas that are cut out from the center of the object. Now, if you look at them, they're set to whole, and you can even delete them, which creates a solid area there where there once was a hole. So why is this useful in particular? Well, it's because they work a lot like, say, cookie cutters. Let's start with this flat slab of perhaps this is cookie dough. I'm going to go to the properties aspect of it, and I'm going to increase the strength of its inflation. It has a little bit of bulge at the front there. You can see here in the top panel that front element there is sort of bulging out some. Let's use, let's say, our custom shape tool. And what shape do you want cookies to be? Oh, there's all sorts we can pick from here. Let's add everything to our list. Let's say we want handprint cookies. Won't those be fun? So my custom shape is set to the hand, and I have it set to path right now, and I'm going to draw out this path of a handprint. And this can work as a cookie cutter on this shape, because if we go to now the boundary constraints, add path to surface, and we get sort of this cut-in appearance to it because it's set to active. Now we can turn it off by setting it to inactive, or we can cut straight through by setting it to whole, which is really the default method that it's used for, so that we can punch holes completely through an extruded material. Now, if you've played around with constraints before, you may not have understood what you were doing, and it's not entirely intuitive either. Because if you have a constraint set to active, but your shape doesn't have any inflation to it, so the strength of that inflation is down to 0%, you don't see anything. The only way you see any effect of that constraint is if it's either set to whole or it's active while that inflation area has some strength to it. Now, this doesn't have to be with paths either. You can also create selections as well, which means if you want, you can use the lasso tool and just create strange looking selections for your cookie shapes. Go to your boundary constraint, add selection to surface, and there's your constraint. Of course, then you have to change that one to a hole if you want it to be. And you are now cutting cookies out of this cookie dough. Now, if you have any experience with 3D modeling at all, your mind may be racing right now. You may be thinking, aha, this is it. This is like Booleans. I can use these constraints to sort of chop away and shape at a solid mass and form it to be exactly what I want it to be. I can do it. This is the modeling answer, figuring out how to create stuff in Photoshop in 3D. Alas, I thought so too. It's really not. And let me show you why. Let's extend out the extrusion depth of our shape again. Let's say your thought is, hey, let's create a constraint that sort of chops out this side piece here. It's like if this were a cookie and you took a big bite out of this corner or even the side area. Well, you can try. You can create a selection. Doesn't matter what shape it is. You go to add a constraint and you get a warning. Cannot add constraint because the constraint you are adding must be completely contained within the top inflation surface. Bummer, right? So you consider, what if I turn it at an angle? What if I have like a very strict angle here and sort of get an angle in there on it? Let's see what that does. Oh, well, we get a little imprint there. And if we change that to whole, look what happens there. It goes straight through just like the rest of them do. So you can't even get the angle to work properly. It still puts it as perpendicular to the surface of that extruded area. So while this is somewhat helpful, it's really good for 3D text. It's really good for punching out cookie shapes in cookie batter. It's not as helpful as it would be if we weren't constrained by so many rules within our constraints. All right, I know that was a short one, guys, but there's really not a lot to know about using constraints. They're not well understood, they're not well used, and they are rather helpful. They do have some application, but not as much as you would hope that there'd be. There's some potential there, but we still have some more growing to do before they can become the true modeling answers that we want them to be. Next lesson, lesson 14, with depth maps.